Hi, this is Scott Speck, Music Director of the Mobile Symphony, here to talk to you about our opening night performance. It's really interesting because every piece on the concert has a very fascinating story associated with it. Shostakovich Festive Overture, which is a great beginning for any concert, let alone for the beginning of a season, is a piece that shows off Shostakovich's amazing facility in composition. This was a piece that he was able to conceive and write the basic structure for in about 1 hour. The story is that the Bolshoi Theater needed a piece to commemorate the 37th anniversary of the October Revolution, and it had been an oversight that they had forgotten to do it up to that point. So, panicked, the head of the theater came to Shostakovich, Dmitri Shostakovich, and asked him to write something. Now, he wasn't always in the good graces of the Soviet authorities, but one thing people knew about him was that he could write quickly. And so within 1 hour, he was able to sketch out the structure of the Festive Overture. He wrote it in a matter of a couple of days. And similar to the great Italian opera composer Gioacchino Rossini, basically Shostakovich would write one page at a time and hand it out the door to copyists who would then take it so it could be performed at the commemorative performance. Anyway, it's a piece that's full of literally fanfare. It has a section at the beginning that's quite slow and portentous. Something exciting is about to happen. And then once the main body of the overture begins, it's fast and furious and very fluffy and lots of fun. The Festive Overture is characterized more by fun and humor than anything else. And in that way, it differs from almost everything else Shostakovich wrote, because he was a composer of great depth and a lot of passion and sometimes a lot of mournful music. So this is very much out of character for Shostakovich, and you might say that you can sometimes almost hear that it's out of character, but that makes it all the more fascinating. Next on the program is An American in Paris by George Gershwin. Now, you know George Gershwin, of course. I mean, he's one of the most beloved American composers. The reason I think that he's one of the most beloved is that he was able to combine classical music and the popular music of the time, which was jazz, into one hybrid middle way art form. They say that he crossed the musical tracks between Tin Pan Alley and Carnegie Hall. And that was so true in Rhapsody in Blue, the piece which really put George Gershwin on the map in 1923. It was many years later that Gershwin, who although he was already really well known as a composer of musicals and a composer of jazz and a really good pianist, he wanted to make himself a little bit more respectable in the eyes of the compositional world, and he went off to France to try to study with, among others, Maurice Ravel. It was a very funny story that he asked Maurice Ravel if he could study with him, and Ravel said, first, tell me, Mr. Gershwin, how much money do you make? And Gershwin said, and keep in mind this was in the 1930s, early 30s, Gershwin said, oh, about $100,000 a year. To which Ravel replied, I should be studying with you. So Ravel refused to give Gershwin any lessons, saying that Gershwin was just fine as he was. He was never going to be a French composer, but he was going to be an excellent American composer. And that indeed is how he is well known. So from that experience came Gershwin's piece, An American in Paris. And this has all kinds of exciting things that are going on in the music, depicting things that might have been his impressions walking through the streets of Paris. At the very beginning, it's extremely literal. You hear two or three different kinds of car horns. You hear all kinds of hustle and bustle of someone walking through a big city. There's also a big love theme and a fantastic solo for trumpet. This is a piece that doesn't need too much elaboration or too much explanation in order to enjoy. I think that Gershwin really wanted you to sort of sit back and take in the sights and sounds of Paris as depicted in music, An American in Paris. The concert ends, second half of the concert, with, I think, one of the most evocative pieces to come out of Russian Romanticism, Scheherazade by Rimsky-Korsakov. There were a set of 5 composers, of which Rimsky-Korsakov was probably the most well-trained of all, who called themselves the Mighty Five or the Mighty Handful, actually directly transferred from Russian, translated from Russian. The words mean more like a mighty heap. But in any case, these 5 composers decided that they wanted to promote Russian nationalism in music. And they did that by hearkening back to old Russian melodies and the outlines of Russian melodies. So if they weren't the actual folk songs, they sounded a lot like them. And also hearken back to Orientalism, because as early as Glinka, who's considered the father of Russian music, this Russian music included elements of what they considered to be Eastern music from the Orient. Now the truth is, nobody really knew at that time and place what music from the Orient sounded like, so they just sort of made it up. You know, they took a scale that sounded exotic, and they used that scale to create certain musical melodies, which became associated with characters. So, Scheherazade is the name of a woman. She was one of many, many wives of the Sultan Shahryar. This is, you know, an old ancient legend. The Sultan Shahryar had a very bad reputation because every time he married one of his wives, they'd have one night of wild abandon, and then he would kill her the next morning. So, you know, not a good reputation for the Sultan. Scheherazade wanted to change that, you know, to save her life. So when he married her, what she did was she wove a tale that was so suspenseful that every night the Sultan wanted to keep her alive one more day to find out how the story ended. And then, of course, she created one cliffhanger after another. At the end of 1001 Nights, that's when the Sultan decided to relent. His heart softened. He realized that he really loved her and vowed that he would love her forever. So very happy ending. And what you hear in Scheherazade, in the 4 movements of Scheherazade, are 4 of the tales, or to some extent it's more 4 of the atmospheres that went along with those tales that Scheherazade wove. Now in this piece, the Scheherazade herself is represented by a violin solo, who in this concert will be performed by our co-concertmaster, NNU.